Suddenly, the world's paying a lot more attention to Mali. 2 weeks ago, it was about non-commissioned officers toppling a 2-decade-old democracy, and this just weeks before the outgoing president was to hand over after elections. The stated aim of the coup? To put the focus back on fighting a northern rebellion stoked by stockpiles of weapons out of Libya. But that's now backfired miserably, with Tuareg rebels going from strength to strength, taking towns like Timbuktu, and they're not the only desert nomads filling the political vacuum up north. Various shades of Islamist Arabs also in those towns. That's got France worrying over the possibility of al-Qaeda-affiliated jihadists settling up shop in West Africa. Who are the rebels, and who are their backers? Could they march on the capital? What's the genuine scope of the threat to the region and beyond? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the crisis in Mali, and with us to talk about it, Jeremy Keenan, who teaches at the University of London's School of Oriental and African Studies. Thank you for being with us. A bit further north in Leeds, Akli Shaka. He is with a Tuareg advocacy group, Imwag International Youth Organization. Thank you for being with us. Joining us from Washington, D.C., retired U.S. Army Colonel Thomas Dempsey. He teaches at the African Center for Strategic Studies. Here in the studio, Vincent Florani, spokesperson for the French Foreign Ministry, and France 24 senior correspondent Cyril Vanier. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for weighing in on the conversation on the France 24 debate Facebook page and on Twitter, where you can find us at François F24. Over in New York, a short while ago, the UN Security Council calling for a cessation of hostilities in northern Mali. Well, now among warning that those militants described as close to al-Qaeda could be on the verge of creating an Islamic State. Let's go to Mali's capital, Bamako. France 24's Yves Irvine joins us from there. Yves, what's the latest on what you're hearing concerning who controls what in the north?
Well, it's still a very confusing situation. However, within the last hour, I have spoken to one of the spokespeople for the MNLA. That's the group of Tuareg rebels that are fighting for an independent homeland in the northern half of Mali. He categorically denies that anyone but the MNLA are in control of the northern region. He says that reports that Al-Nardin, that's the radical Islamist group linked to the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, the reports that they have taken over is just, he categorically denies. He said that while they have somehow battled together in the past or worked together to push this offensive forward, any of the towns, Gao, Kidal and Timbuktu, were taken by the MNLA. It's the MNLA that are still in control. Now, one thing, the tone of the people I've spoken to within this MNLA over the last 2 days does seem to be changing slightly. He didn't want to say that they were going to enter into combat with Al-Nardin, but he did say that within the last 2 weeks, really this group has started to get very, very radical. It's started to change. It's become apparent that they are closely linked to Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. And really the MNLA today are not afraid that they will lose their positions, but they're afraid that their cause for an independent homeland for Tuareg nomads will get confused in all of this, and that the international community will focus more on that.
We've seen in the past 24 hours, Yves, residents fleeing the town of Mopti, which is well outside of that northern region. They're fearing a further advance of these northern rebels. Have you seen any tangible signs of that panic?
No, here on the streets of Bamako, life is going on as normal. Indeed, people are slightly tense, but they're going about their daily lives, shopping, going to work, perhaps stocking up on slightly more provisions and indeed petrol than they would have, this because of the sanctions that were slapped on the junta on Monday. Now, these reports of fighting gone as far as Mopti has people slightly concerned because the MNLA once again said that they had already obtained their objective and didn't need to take another centimetre of land. So it's an another sign that it's the radical Islamists that are pushing forward. However, when you ask people on the streets here, can they imagine that Bamako could fall to them? They can't even conceive the idea, and they refuse to accept that it's a possibility. And despite the critical situation, if you like, here, people still remain pretty much in favour of the coup d'etat, and said that change had to happen in Mali.
All right. Thanks for that. Yves Irvine reporting for us from Bamako for France 24. Before I go to Jeremy Keenan for his reaction to what Yves said, let's just, I guess you could say, get the scorecard straight. We're talking about at least three movements. There you heard Yves mentioning the MNLA. That's the Tuareg rebellion, which until a few days ago was demanding autonomy, and now really a breakaway state. They've been at the forefront of the initial fighting. Now, there's also, she mentioned it, Ansar Din, led by a Tuareg rebel leader, Iyad Ag Hali, with a much more Islamist bent. And we're hearing conflicting word over how much they control in those northern towns. Ansar Din accused of working in collaboration with Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, a jihadist organization whose leaders are Algerian Salafists. Jeremy Keenan, the confused situation in the north, what we're hearing is that it was the MNLA that did the initial fighting, but it's Ansar Din in places like Timbuktu that's since set up shop.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Fine, good. Okay, because I've only just come online. Yeah, that's absolutely right. As you said, you've got three groupings up there. You've got the MNLA, you've got Ansar al-Din and ACME. I think the thing which needs to be made clear is that the MNLA is opposed to both Ansar al-Din and ACME. There's a lot of, let's call it propaganda, disinformation being put out by many parties that they are in some way aligned or working together. That is not the case at all. What needs to be made absolutely clear is that both, there is a relationship between Iyad, you mentioned him, Iyad, the old Tuareg rebel, and ACME. That relationship is that they both work together. They have done for quite some time. Both of them are linked to the Algerian secret police, the secret services.
How so?
Yes. The three leaders of ACME in this region, that is Abdulhamid Abu Zaid, Mokhtar Ben Mokhtar, and Yahya Jouadi, are all three DRS, that's the Algerian secret police, the Direction du Renseignement et de la Sécurité. All three work with and alongside the DRS. And Iyad has been paid and has worked for the DRS more or less consistently since 2003. So the most dangerous thing that's going on here is actually what is behind these two so-called Islamist movements. That is the Algerian secret police. And we have an increasing number of reports in the last couple of days out of Timbuktu and Gao that they have seen, people think they have seen, Algerian special forces working with Iyad in these towns, and that much of the looting and the damage that's being done there is not being done by MNLA, but it's being done by the so-called Islamists, possibly Algerian special forces in disguise.
Hang on, why would, Jeremy Keenan, why would the Algerian special forces want to fuel Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb?
Because basically it runs Al-Qaeda in the Sahel region. It has done ever since 2006 when it was transplanted there, and this is known to Western intelligence services in actual fact. So that has been the case, since almost the beginning. The destabilization of that region, which has been going on for some time, using ACME as its sort of front leveraging tool, if you like. Underneath this is the drugs traffic, and the Algerian interest in this region is manifold. One of the reasons their interest is to get greater security over the huge cocaine trafficking route, which is one reason why ATT, the Mali government, was being accused of sort of corruption, because the government was actually protecting it, as also are rogue elements within the Algerian army and Algerian DRS.
All right,
That is the situation which one needs to keep a very, very close eye on and focus on much more.
All right, before I go to get a reaction on what you've said from Thomas Dempsey, let's just tell you what France 24 Observer's website has found out. We've been speaking with a dozen eyewitnesses in the past 48 hours in the north of Mali, both in Timbuktu and in the city of Gao. In Timbuktu, the situation was described Monday as one where overnight women were taken to wearing veils, Islamists in control of the town, not the MNLA, in some instances giving back stolen goods and threatening to chop off the hands of looters. In Gao, the town described as more evenly divided between Islamists and the MNLA Tuareg rebels there. Thomas Dempsey, let me get your reaction, and what's your feel of the situation up north, and what's your reaction to what Jeremy Keenan just said about the Algerian influence in all of this?
Well, I first have to certainly say that Jeremy Keenan is kind of a legend in the African studies community for his knowledge of this region of Africa, and I have a tremendous respect for his perspective. I would have to say my concern, and let me add, I'm not on the ground in Mali, so I offer the perspective of a former military officer with quite a bit of experience working with West African militaries, and I do have some experience in West African countries that sort of have been where Mali is right now. My concern would be the broader security situation in northern Mali and soon, I think, in Bamako and throughout the rest of the country. This is a very fragile environment. It had a lot of problems that weren't necessarily connected to the rebellion, an extended drought, really, really tough humanitarian human needs conditions here. And my concern is that is a deteriorating situation that is going to be accelerated by the current events. I would be less concerned with the victory or the success or lack thereof of one faction or another in this situation than I would about the generally deteriorating security situation as a whole.
All right, the general security situation as a whole. But what about the, let me put it to you, Vincent Floriani. First of all, what's the word you're getting over who's in control of what in the north? I'll put the same question I've put to both our panelists up to now.
Well, there, as previous speakers said, I mean, there are various groups. You have the MNLA, whose objective is to have to gain control of the territory of that part of Mali. You've got Hakim, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and you've got Ansar-Din. Mostly those three groups, and you've got also people who are linked to trafficking, to different kind of trafficking in the.
It's all confused to us because we're talking about jihadists on the one hand and drug trafficking. What's the motive here?
Well, you've got also different motives. Each group has its own motives. What's worrying us are the groups linked to terrorism, to Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb, because they represent a threat for the whole region. They represent a threat for the southern part of Mali as well, for the people living there.
Let me ask you, Akli Shakad, do you get the sense that perhaps the MNLA has been outflanked by more radical elements in Timbuktu?
No, I don't think so, actually. I think the MNLA is in a strong position, and it's actually acting wisely because they know what's going on, and they don't want actually to create more problems because it's the beginning of the way of them. These two groups, Ansar-Din and yesterday we have seen another group which is calling himself At-Tawheed. And the other rumors about Al-Qaeda and Hakim. I think the MNLA actually knows that they have a problem with the Ansar-Din at the beginning from this uprising, but they come at some point. They agreed together that their target actually is to Azawad state, and then since then they are working together. But there is no any affiliation with these two groups according to the sources we had, but even either by MNLA or Ansar ad-Din. But unfortunately, as Professor Keenan said about Iyad Aghali, I think he's an agent for Algerian, and everyone knows that. And I think the evidence that because we are getting now this group now, why is it just now emerged? And after all this success, and they are working for Algeria, as everyone knows, and Algeria don't want the Azawad or the Tuareg actually to have their own state, and that's why this group now just emerged, and he's trying, and he had been ignored, and everyone actually disrespect him and have among the Tuareg society because he's the guy who's behind all the problems of the Tuareg.
Vincent Floreni, let me get you just to react to this. Is Algeria part of the problem here?
I can't comment on that. I mean, what we have been trying to do to solve the problem of terrorism in Sahel is to get the countries of the region, ECOWAS as a start, the West African states, and Algeria to work together to try to find a solution to that problem. So we want to work with all the countries, including Algeria, and we are ready to support action in order to cope with the problem of terrorism in Sahel.
Jeremy Keenan, making that point, when you went to Mali in 2010, were there complaints that there were elements inside of Algeria who perhaps were disrupting things, who were perhaps trying to capitalize on the drug trade and the like?
No, it's not something you hear when you go to southern Mali and places like Bamako. It is a prevalent theory among most of the experts in this field. Obviously, no one has proof. No one has caught the Algerian state red-handed in trying to manipulate al-Qaeda. What you can say is that the only army that is decent and that has real military strength in the region is Algeria. The only player that could militarily weigh in on this issue is Algeria. And for years, they have not put an end to al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, whom, as you reminded earlier on in this debate, are just historically an emanation, it's a new name for what used to be the GSPC, which is an Algerian-born terrorist group.
All right, when we come back, I want to pick up on what you saw when you were out there in Algeria and to find out exactly what's being done to police the Sahara Desert. Stay with us. The France 24 debate continues.